Lessons learned on experimenting with team structures at ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology. To find a good fit is our topic of discussion today. Once again, I am joined by Krystal Brady. I've had the pleasure of working with ASCO and Krystal for over 3 years now.
Yeah.
Krystal is the Director for Digital Experience and Strategy at ASCO. Just some of her credentials. She is a Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant and a Senior Scrum Master and a PMP. And this year, she was one of the 50 people that PMI selected as PMI's Future 50, a very, very high distinction. So Krystal, share just a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I've been working at ASCO for over 10 years. And in that time, I've worked as a project manager. I've worked as a product manager. I've been spending the last few years working on our digital transformation, our Agile adoption, and trying to drive us into value stream delivery. And part of that is a heavy focus on product and making sure that we have organizational alignment between where our organization wants to go and where our customers want to go. And so that's where we're spending a lot of time right now, is looking at the digital transformation. What are those things that we need to be able to move forward for ASCO and for our customers? And then how do we continue to evolve our Agile adoption so that we're able to do that in a really efficient and impactful way?
Excellent. So the beginning of Agile and with Discipline Agile at ASCO, which was, a little over 3 years ago. So why don't you talk a little bit from a lessons learned perspective before we get into all of the great team stuff, just
Sure.
why and how?
Yeah, it was actually, I remember it was March or May. It must have been right. It was right before the pandemic all broke loose, right? Because I remember we were meeting virtually, and that was different then, but it's just not now. So that's interesting. But so about 3.5 years, and at the time we had a couple of different delivery teams who had different methods of doing development and delivery, and we had gotten to a point as an organization where we knew we had a lot of work that we had to do, a lot of applications that needed to be upgraded, a lot of technology that needed to be moved forward. And so alongside this need for a digital transformation, we realized that we had to up our skill level in terms of doing Agile. So the teams before, there had been some level of hybrid where we would do sprint planning and work towards those goals, but it wasn't until we came to Discipline Agile that we realized that there was this great way to be able to pick and choose all of these different areas of the adoption, not just in what we called sprint planning and delivery. So that led us down the path to Discipline Agile, trying to really have a consistent adoption across all of our teams. And then that led us to a lot of different team formations.
It did. And I know during that time, there was also standing up of team leads and product owners, right? So moving people into some new roles.
We did. So when we first started, we worked with Joshua with Process Mentors to do some initial training. What is Agile? What are these different roles? What does this really mean? And then we looked into the organization where we had these different delivery teams and we had these different support roles and said, what do we have now and what do we need for the future for us to be able to do that? And so we ended up adopting some people into product owner roles. We ended up adopting some people into team lead roles, and then working with them. And we still work with them actually now to continue to refine that skill and their ability to assist the Agile teams within those roles.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull up this for just a moment. So, hi, Rami. Great to see you out there. And Rami was one of the first people that had engaged with me on behalf of ASCO and got some of the initial work going.
That's so cool.
Hi, great to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, so from there, right now, kind of getting into some of the team structures and maybe a little bit of how originally there were teams that were using a time boxed approach, right? Like the iterations, as well as at some point there was a transition to a flow-based model for some innovation work.
Right. Yeah, definitely. We started out with, I mentioned before we undertook this, what we call the digital transformation, and we had two main teams. One of them was focused on supporting our external facing applications. The other was focused on supporting our internal facing applications, and that left a lot to be desired, just because they were using different methodologies for delivery. One used sprint based, one didn't. And so when we went to Discipline Agile and we started adopting these teams, we really still had this sense that we were going to have some alignment around that. We were going to have a web experience and an internal applications experience. And so we started off with I think 3 different kinds of product teams. We were calling them product teams, and that was pretty good. It was just new. It was really new for a lot of people, but we were able to get some initial things done. So what was great about it was that there was space for people to learn Discipline Agile and to adopt these new ways of working. We did have some crossover in the team, so people started getting a little bit more introduced to the work that the other groups were doing, and how they were doing it. But having that alignment and that central purpose about how really helped us clarify what we were trying to achieve in the end, right? What the value is and how we're going to achieve that value. And then a little bit further along in the process, also partially because of the pandemic, actually, we ended up having this huge amount of work we had to do. So in March of 2020, we found out that we were going to have to host our meeting. Our annual meeting in Chicago is 5 days. We host typically around 40,000 professionals. We were going to have to move all of that online. And so we engaged with a vendor to augment our team to build out that work that we needed to do. And it turns out that because we were building this digital platform for our meeting, we weren't really working in a time box way. So a lot of our work was we tried to have those teams in the time box method, but we had a lot of carryover. We weren't doing regular releases to end users because we were building an MVP. And so we decided to try Flow. And that was really great for different reasons, right? So when we went into the flow-based method, we put our teams together, and the benefits there were that we took away the pressure of having to have these disparate things done in a certain amount of time. It wasn't really making sense, again, because we weren't delivering chunks. We weren't making an end user impact just yet. We really wanted to make sure that we were kind of behind the scenes building everything that we were going to need. And so the team was freed up to kind of work on those bits that they had and then move on to the next one that they had. And we just continually rearranged our queue based on whatever that next thing was that needed to be done. And so that worked out for us for a while, but we definitely had some struggle with that too. So what we found in Flow was that the amount of work that we had in the different applications we were working within, there was a lot of confusion about, there was a lot of noise. I won't say confusion. There was just a lot of noise. There were a lot of things to look at and a lot of things to try to do. And then we had these groups, we had these meetings that had big groups of people. So we weren't seeing the engagement that we really wanted. It's easier to speak up in a small group, I think. So that was definitely some of the challenges of the flow-based model that we went into.
And one of the things that Krystal and I have discussed is just the great opportunity for her and the people at ASCO, where they've had an opportunity to experiment with not only sort of different team arrangements, but also different ways of working, right? And they've kind of moved back and forth between, iterations, sprints, time boxes, and then using a, Kanban-based approach, a flow model. So it's been very interesting watching all of that unfold. The other thing that brought, I think, a little bit of complexity from a team perspective, like a lot of organizations have, right, is a mixture of, right, so you have employees, right, doers of work, not just like an oversight sort of role. But then you also have contractors. You use vendors to be able to also augment your capabilities. So what are some of the things you can share that has happened over the past few years?
So we've really, I think that we've really learned that one of the real beautiful things about Discipline Agile is the ability to change your way of working depending on the situation that you're in or the work that you have. So we've had two different, I would say, primary groups of people that we've worked with, and in both of them, we were able to uh, have the teams define their way of working using those disciplined agile standards, and that's been really beneficial for getting them to align and have a good delivery cadence. But then there are also those challenges, right? There's whenever you introduce new people, there's always the storming and norming pieces where you have to get through that initial phase and get people acclimated to working in those new ways, right? So that's definitely been a lot of lessons learned, and I think has put us in a really great place where in the future, if we continue to do that, then we have these lessons right now. We know, okay, there's going to be this period we're going to have to go through this, and these are the things that were really helpful before, and the things that are going to be really helpful after. And the reality is that we've actually been able to pick up a lot of really great things from our vendor partners in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. And I think probably the same for them, right? Have been able to transition some of the things that we do well for them as well.
Yeah. So, time has passed, and there has been some evolution with respect to the team leads and the product owners. And what I'll also share as a sort of a entry into this is that Krystal was able to set up some things to help, right, in evolve, upskill, grow people into these team lead role and product owner roles.
Right.
And it's worked really well in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it has. So we were able to work together with some different trainings. So I mentioned that we initially started out with some basic training, but over time we've tried to focus in on areas of improvement that we've noticed. So we adopted people into product owner roles that wasn't necessary. It was something that they were doing, just not necessarily being called that. But then there were other aspects of that role that we needed to teach them. So we focused in on some specific training for product owners. We are actually rolling out different sorts of training across the rest of the organization based on people who aren't in software delivery. So we've seen this really great uptake and interest around, well, how can I add Agile to my way of working, but I'm in finance or I'm in HR? So what are those different ways that we can adopt Agile for people who aren't in that traditional software development path? And that's been really great too. And then a third thing that we did was I started an Agile practice, community of practice. And so I wanted to open it up to the entire organization and be able to talk about different concepts and different skills and introduce different ideas with those same groups of people, both people who are practicing it in software development, but then also people who are outside of that, so that we can continue to evolve it at the organizational level, not just department by department. And I think that that's going really well. We've just been doing that now for 4 or 5 months, I think. And it's really exciting to see the community grow and get these different tools and we have these really great conversations about how do you manage the backlog, who prioritizes it, how do you if you don't have delivery deadlines, how do you manage that work? And so it's been really great having those conversations with a lot of different kinds of people.
Yeah, and also seeing just people that are coming to all of the meetings, right? Especially the
Yeah,
people that are not in IT, which has been great, and coming back with things that they've either, continued to sort of dive into more depth on their own, come
right.
back with questions
Yeah.
or some bit of guidance or whatever. So that's also been really exciting.
It is. It's really great to see those concepts take hold and then to have that further delivery. I think two of my favorite things about Agile in general aren't really necessarily software development things. It's fast feedback and continuous improvement. And those are things that can be applied everywhere. I
Yeah.
really like that you can adopt both of those principles in ways that can improve your everyday life, not just even necessarily maybe your work life, but they in our HR department, for instance, maybe they have learning courses and they can get staff feedback on those and then continue to improve them. Things like that.
So executive level buy-in for value
Yes.
stream delivery.
So this kind of goes back to our next evolution, I think, and maybe we can spend a little more time kind of thinking about the different variations of the teams that we had. So we started off with our two kind of teams that were focused in really siloed ways, and we said, okay, we don't want to be siloed anymore. We want to change that. We want to be a group. And then we moved into a group, and we said, okay, this is really great too, because we no longer have these silos. Everyone kind of knows what everyone is doing, but then there was also a lot of noise, and it was challenging because we still wanted people to be able to focus on their work area, not have the silos, but then not also be potentially overwhelmed. And so we went into 3 delivery teams. And again, those were a little bit less siloed, a little bit more lateral divisions, because we're still working on the digital ecosystem and trying to move our old applications into our new architecture. And then the trouble that we had there was a little bit of people stepping on each other's toes. So we didn't have the vertical silos, but then people are working in similar systems in the same environments. And so they really need to be able to coordinate and talk through and have that awareness of who's doing what, so that people aren't working over each other, really. And so we had to refine that a little bit. And so ultimately what we've come to now after, over the last 6 months, 7 months, we've been working really with 2 teams, one that's doing a majority of our operational work and some of our end user work, and another that's been building a different platform for us. And we're coming to a point where we realize that maybe the best of both worlds is to really be able to offer product-focused teams instead of this idea that they can be based on specific types of applications, or this lateral thing where we're all moving stuff into the new architecture, but we're dividing up that responsibility so that there's less overwhelming feeling. And so what's really great about where we're headed now, and that's something that we're going to be doing in the next 2 to 4 weeks, is that there's a level of the executive buy-in as well. So we've been able to go back and say, we've tried this, and we tried this, and we tried this, and these are the pros that we found along the way, and these are the cons. And we really think that this is going to be a great mix of all of those things, because in a product-focused teams, you can switch team members in and out, right? So we can still cross-train, and we can still share knowledge. We can divide up our architecture, at least to a certain degree, so that people don't have to work over each other and they can focus in on those things. We remove the amount of noise and all of the voices that were in the large group by still giving them disparate sets of work to focus on. And we use sprint time boxes, so that we've moved away from the flow based and back into having regular releases. We are delivering things to the end user at this point. We want to have that commitment to delivering value. We want our stakeholders to know when their work is going to be delivered. So moving into this concept of having really dedicated teams, we're really getting the executive buy-in as well to understand that this could be the best of all of those things that we've tried so far. And alongside that, being able to go into product-focused teams is also going to help us continue to move into value stream delivery. So ultimately, what I hope to do is be able to establish our value streams along those product paths or those product areas, and start to really be able to paint a picture for everyone that's involved about where it starts at the organizational level and goes to the customer level, and then all the way back around. I guess the customer, organizational, and back to customer, right? Because that's really who we want to focus on, is that outside in. So what is the customer value? How does that align with the organization? Who are all of the people that are aligned with that? And how can we paint the picture that says, this is what, and this is why, and this is how? And that's going to be really fun too.
Yeah. And so one last thing that I wanted you to share a little bit on is how, once, you were a team, right, and their approach was underway, then one of the things that you did, and you also trained others in how to identify how work is flowing, right? When you've got some things that are, going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards, backwards, right?
Yeah.
And again, just looking at why things are delayed and looking for trends and so forth. So how about sharing a little bit of what you've been able to do? Because it's been pretty fantastic.
Oh, thank you. That's really nice of you to say. a lot of different kinds of things. So from my perspective, part of the value stream delivery is looking for those impediments and helping the delivery teams understand where we have challenges that we need to overcome to smooth out that delivery path. And so we do things like taking snapshots of our sprints every day or every other day so that we can see how long the work is in a specific status. And that helps us see if there are the same roadblocks over and over. Is the
Yeah,
ticket. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm gonna interrupt you for just a second because that's such a great practice, right? So what Krystal's describing these snapshots is they're using Kanban boards, and it's just taking a screenshot of the Kanban board every day and
Right.
putting that somewhere where you can just see day over day over day that bit of information. And there's lots of data that you get out of your ALM tool, you get out of Jira, but that combined with what you're doing with these snapshots really paints a really cool picture.
It does. We can use the snapshots for that visual reference, and then we use exports from Jira to give us things like what the current status is, who the current assignee is. It actually really helps me see what work has been introduced into the middle of a sprint because we still deal with that as well. It helps me see what work comes out of a sprint, and then we can use that in our retro to understand what happened. So we're looking at things like we have a status in Jira that's called back to dev so that we can see when we have handbacks, how many times are we getting tickets and what tickets specifically are we seeing this? It goes to dev, it goes to QA, it comes back, it goes back, it comes back. Because we want to make sure that if that's an issue with how the ticket was defined, changing criteria, a bug was found, that we're being really intentional about understanding why and then resolving to fix that for the future so that again we can be more efficient. And then the so we also look for carryover. How much carryover do we have from sprint to sprint, and why? Was it because of the work that was introduced in the middle of the sprint? Was it an unexpected lack of capacity? Was it a change in requirements? And so we want to understand how long tickets are in each status, were there handbacks, how much carryover did we have? We want to understand capacity. So really getting the team, we haven't always used story points very consistently, but trying to get the team to adhere to using story points consistently so we can really understand capacity and move more towards that instead of saying, well, we closed 25 tickets. Well, that could have been 25 tickets of any size, right? And that doesn't necessarily paint the same picture. So what does our capacity look like? And yeah, and I think that's probably like the most helpful ones that we've seen so far.
Yeah, and so the data that Krystal's talking about, right? All these very somewhat simple measures, but it paints a pretty compelling picture. And some of the struggles, like a lot of teams, a lot of organizations, yes, there is some pushed work that happens,
Yeah,
right? And I know there's a bit of capacity that's reserved because we know that that's something that just, it still happens. But being able to show some of the impacts of that and why some of that needs to stop, or sometimes there are reasons. I mean, there's stuff that
right.
comes up and it's very important to introduce into the workflow because it's something that is got some criticality with it. But you
Yeah.
visualize all that really, really well.
I always say accounting is simple but powerful because just having that data or having that visual glance, even if you don't have numbers or letters, helps you make decisions about the future and helps you understand, Josh, what you mentioned, trends. What are our trends? Where are we having troubles? Is it always a block on QA? Is it always a block on PM review? And then understanding what we need to do, again, to target some additional training or updating our ways of working, looking at our team norms to make sure that we can smooth out those curves.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been an interesting journey and continues to
Yeah,
be an interesting journey for you at ASCO and all of the great progress and great lessons learned and the stuff that's gone great and stuff that's not gone so great.
yeah.
Um,
I think that's what's really humbling about the experience. It's been 3.5 years and I still feel like we have room to grow, right? So there are the things that I hope that we're going to be able to do this information, set aside capacity for interruptions or for tech debt, be able to help the team understand why that's important, be able to have limit our carryover to things that are just really necessary and all of the things that can come along with what do we understand about our impediments? What are those future ways of working that we can continue to refine? How do we become a really high performing team and be able to really deliver customer value?
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Krystal, thanks again for sharing all of these wonderful lessons learned. And thanks everybody who's watching this live and posting comments, as well as those of you that'll be watching this on replay. Post any comments, any questions, anything that Krystal and I might be able to answer. And we'll see you on the next live stream for all things Discipline Agile. Thanks everyone.
Joshua. Thanks, everyone.